What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And today, we're here to update the latest practice report for the Lions on a Friday. So let's get it started. Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with some Detroit Lions news. And we've done this over the last few weeks in like a live stream type of setting. Today, I'm doing a pre-recorded. I don't think the Niners report's going to change a ton because for them, it's mainly about the offensive line and just the in and out. How are they going to shuffle around that offensive line that's completely banged up? It's a mess over there on their offensive line. They've added some new pieces to the mix. But on the Lions side, we're continuing, I think, to get some real positive news here. Like Jaylen Reeves-Maybin, it looks like he actually may be on track to playing this week, and Khalif Raymond, probably not according to Dan Campbell, but he could be potentially 2 days of full participation. So there's actually real positives. Before we get into this, just want to let y'all know that I plan on dropping like a preview / prediction, either live stream or video this weekend at some point. Of course, we'll do something on Monday before the game because we'll have time for a pregame show. But at some point this weekend, I plan on dropping some sort of video or probably a live stream, one of the two. But it'll probably be a little bit shorter than what it typically is unless it's live and we're just kind of chatting, because I wanted to kind of pull back on how long those videos actually were. But there will still be definitely some breakdown elements to it because I have begun watching the San Francisco 49ers, and I think in a lot of ways it feels like this is where they can be incredibly dangerous. I mean, there's people questioning Kyle Shanahan and bringing him back, and you look at the record, it's crazy. I mean, the team has 6 wins this year. It doesn't make any sense. They're out of the playoffs. That feels like a dangerous San Fran team because I can't help but every time I watch them, like, man, they still got dudes. They have real weapons. Debo took off last week on Miami. Even though they're dealing with all their offensive line, that's been an issue in the past, and they've found ways to put up points with that. They still have Fred Warner, who's incredible. They still have Nick Bosa. Like, this is a team that I just feel like is never not dangerous. Even the games that they've lost, some of them have been close. They lost to Miami. They've been in control of those games at times. I remember the Rams game earlier this year when it just felt like kind of they gave the Rams a football game. They did that multiple times. Jake Moody, after the injury, has been inconsistent. That's been kind of a mess for him, but they're hopeful for him going forward. I just feel like San Fran's never not dangerous. They always have dudes. I think we're the better football team, but it's interesting. The 3.5 point spread seems wild. I think it is. I think this is the time to get in on it. You know, shout out to BetUS. But all that being said, I can also understand where people still can look at the Niners and be like, yo, they still got talent. So let's go to the injury report first for the Lions because there's some real positives trending this way. Starting off at the top, no David Montgomery again. Again, he hasn't went on IR yet. The Lions can only take so many guys on. I believe it's only 8 guys that you can actually take back off of IR. So they may try to avoid that until they like fully know, okay, this guy's not available by just holding him on the 53-man roster. I have no issue with it, right? They ended up getting third test, and it turned out that like, hey, he doesn't need surgery. Maybe that's kind of where we're at with this. And well done, David. I'm glad that he did that and he didn't rush into like, okay, let's do the procedure and you're not completely sure. I understand that it takes multiple tests. I mean, my only experience is my ACL injury, and my goodness, they didn't know it was a tear for a while, right? It took a long time for that to get like, oh, okay, actually, maybe you are going to need surgery on this. This thing ain't healing. So I understand, get multiple testing, do your thing, man. But hopefully maybe we'll get some good news at some point with Montgomery, but I wouldn't expect him to be playing anytime soon. It's just maybe in the playoffs, maybe not. We'll see. It'll be interesting with that running back position because to me, one thing that I would like to see the Lions do, as much as I like Jahmyr Gibbs, we did a video on Wednesday about the 5 reasons to believe in the Lions being able to win it all this year. All right, I put that together. It's on Bleacher Report right now. It's like a 30-some minute show, and I gave you 5 reasons. And I'm not going to go through all those over here because that content's over there. Definitely go check it out. But one of the points that we brought up was experience, and Jahmyr Gibbs, of course, having that experience. Last year, he had the fumble against San Fran, and this is in a lot of ways is kind of a full circle potential moment here. I mean, the Lions could literally lock up the 1 seed against San Fran after last year being knocked out of going to the Super Bowl against San Fran and giving up a big lead in San Fran. Like, there's so many things that kind of come full circle with this matchup. A guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, the experience that a guy like that has, he's a great example because last year he had the fumble in the playoffs. He's done that a few times, but it was a bad fumble at the time. But now with him being in that moment, understanding the moment, and now over these last few weeks, getting a bulk of the load, it's like, hey, you have to be able to play that way. You're not just the dynamic change of pace, like go get a big play kind of deal. Like you have to be more of the, hey, you're going to get a bulk of the carries. You are the number 1 back in the meantime. Now, that being said, I think slowly he's been working towards that. The goal lines, the short yardage situations, the success there. Of course, the pass game, that's continued to just kind of take off for Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think over the last few weeks, he's been his most dynamic in those spots. Gives me a lot of optimism. But I also would like to see the Lions continue to get some of these other backs to football that they may have to lean on when we get to the playoffs. Next up, though, Terrion Arnold was listed with illness on Thursday, but came back limited participation today. That's a big positive. Hopefully he's okay. Graham Glasgow, full participation the last 2 days. He missed last week. Mahogany stepped in, played really well. He clearly looks like the Lions' backup guard at this point, but they still have real solid depth there. We still having KO'd on the roster who played in the playoffs for us last season and played okay. I said it been in that moment. So getting Graham back is definitely a positive, and it seems like it's trending that direction. Plus, we know about the center flexibility as well, so it's always good to just have that guy healthy, but he's set to be potentially returning this week. And then Raymond, I don't expect him to play, but he has had full participation the last 2 weeks, and I didn't even realize until we did the Bleacher Report show how good he's actually been. Like, he's been an excellent power returner ever since he's become that for the Lions, and over the last few years, it's like, okay, his numbers are really strong, but even this season, he's graded out as the best special teams punt returner in football, according to Pro Football Focus. And if you look at his numbers, 14.4 yards per return, that's one of the best in the league, and also on top of that, he does have a punt return for a touchdown. He has been fantastic when he's been back there, and we know the Lions kind of rotated that, like it went from Maurice Alexander, let's go to Tom Kennedy, and Kennedy's not a big return threat, but he will catch the ball. Like, he does, I think, a really nice job with that. But the element that Khalif adds back to the special teams unit for potentially the playoffs, can't overlook that, because special teams is such a big part of who this team is, and Khalif has been fantastic there. Not even just special teams, of course, we know that he's super impactful in offense as well. He's got a very specific role for the Lions. Doesn't get the ball, but then there's also times where you're in a big game and he has a stretch of 3 receptions, and you're like, oh snap, Khalif was a really good matchup there. That's how this receiving core is really built. It's built for a lot of matchups, but the emergence of Jameson Williams has kind of taken on the role, like, I can go beat the number 2 corner, Saints steal the number 1, but you also have some matchup pieces, so he'll add that element back into the mix, and we know he blocks. But Khalif Raymond, especially for special teams, getting him back at some point, especially just for the playoffs, would be fantastic. And then finally, Jaylen Reeves-Maybin, it actually looks like he actually may give it a go this week. I'm curious to see how that plays out. After we did the video yesterday, Quan Alexander was also let go, the linebacker, which to me tells me that that's for Jaylen Reeves-Maybin. Interesting to go with Quan Alexander rather than go with a guy like Ezekiel Turner. Clearly they like Turner. I thought maybe that would be the way that they would go, because I thought that would be like kind of like a, okay, that's a replacement. Quan didn't really play, neither did, of course, David Long, who was also waived. So I guess it makes sense just in terms of who was getting snaps that they kind of let go of the 2 guys that weren't playing this past week once Ben Neiman kicked back to off-ball linebacker. And yeah, they have like Ezekiel Turner, especially in those third down spots, but Jaylen, who has been kind of in a clear-cut role when it's come to the playoffs, like, yeah, he's a sub-package type of linebacker, and he's a very good red zone coverage backer. Like, that's where he made his impact felt in 2023. Getting him back for those moments is where he's crucial. He played 29 snaps. Now, he didn't play much of the San Fran game because of injury, and Malcolm stepped in and did fine, but he played 29 snaps. It wasn't huge roles, like 11 and 14 and, 2 of the 3 playoff games, and in those games, he was massive in those big spots where teams are throwing the football and the field condenses and playing fast, and he's one of the linebackers on the team, especially without Alex in the meantime, that I think is a much better just pure matchup piece at backer. Like, I still don't think Turner's a great matchup piece, though he is an athlete. He's not like a great, like, go put him on him, he's going to take him out of the play. I thought he was much better than last week, like, especially late in broken plays, that kind of thing. But in terms of being able to just, like, go match a running back or even at times a tight end, Jaylen might be our best option in that spot, especially without Alex Anzalone. So, last week we saw Iffy step into that role. Getting a guy like Jaylen back is not only crucial for red zone, which is where the Lions have been great this season. Even Kyle Shanahan in his presser on Wednesday was asked about the Lions defense, how much different does it look with the injuries. And, this kind of validates what we've said is like, he's like, it's not that much different. They're still the first third down defense in football. They're still top red zone defense in the NFL, and Jaylen adds so much to that. Yesterday on Bleacher Report, we kind of talked through that, so definitely go check it out. We kind of talked about situationally how good the Lions have been. Red zone and third down is where, to me, he's at his most valuable. But he could play on all downs. Like, if you needed him to step in as your will backer at a time, you could absolutely just have him play that role, and I think there's a path for him to even do that as soon as this week if he's right, because Jack Campbell and Jaylen can play together. Even though Ben Neiman did really well against the run last week, there's a real spot for him to go in and be a full-time starter if you wanted to, until at least Alex gets back. So for the meantime, it could mean really good dosage of Jaylen Reeves-Maybin potentially mixing with Ben, or it could be as like, okay, this is hopefully what we're looking at when Alex comes back, which is situationally you're very important, and I think that's what we're looking towards right now with Jaylen Reeves-Maybin. It'd be great to get that piece back, and then of course anytime he's on special teams, doesn't hurt to have that guy on special teams. He's pretty good over there, really reliable. So Lions injury report definitely trending the right direction as of now. Over the last kind of month, it's been about the bad, but I think there's actually a lot of good things, and then hopefully potentially Alex Anzalone at some point here. And then to go back to Kyle Shanahan for a second, speaking on the defense, he did talk about one of the biggest differences being the players that we have in the back end versus what we had last year when they saw us, and that was Vildor out wide, that was Sutton out wide, that was still Branch, Iffy, and Kirby. now with a little bit more experience, but now wide corner just looks different with Terrion Arnold, and of course even with Amik Robertson, who played really well last week. And I know there was a lot of praise there for Aaron Glenn, especially as a run defender, the way that he was just battling as a cornerback in that game. So that's where I'm at with it. Like, it stinks not having Carlton. We don't have like that number one right now. What we do have is a very well-rounded back end, and I've said it over there and I'll say it here again. To me, this is objectively a better secondary than what we had last year. And if Alex comes back and now we have Jaylen in the fold and Jack Campbell, who's playing much better than he did last season, more well-rounded, the way he's playing the run, the consistency there, that to me is a better linebacker room than what you had last year in the playoffs, specifically when you were in that game. The defensive line, yeah, I could give last year kind of the nod there, even though nose tackle is better now. You give him the nod because we had Aleem and we had Hutch, and we don't have those guys now, and Cal brought it up, not having win one-on-one guys. But specifically for a game like this week where their offensive line's kind of a mess, hopefully some of these guys where it's kind of like, hey, this is a full strength in numbers thing, which I've continued to preach over here, is like, yo, it's strength in numbers, whether that's from red zone blitzing, flexibility, if he can roll down and blitz, Branch can blitz, like that's where the Lions have to win. And then it's up front. When you have the promising matchup, somebody needs to go find ways to win in that game. And I think that's where the Lions are built, and it's what came through against Chicago. We're not going to have a guy that cooks or forces double teams that often, but whether it's Smith, Levi, who I thought really came along last week, who we're going to continue to rely on, DJ Reader, if he has a really good matchup on the interior at times, even Muhammad, who closed the deal off. That's what it's going to be about for the Lions, is guys like that. It's going to be situationally, it's going to be about moments, and it's going to be about the strength that we have in depth. We have to lean into that. It has to replace Hutch or has to replace Aleem, because we can't do that. We just need it to be very well-rounded. And I think the same thing that we're seeing and why the secondary is having success is that exact same reason, because it's well-rounded. There's not a lot of like glaring holes in the back end. We may not have the elite corner. We may not have a top 10 corner in football, but we have is a very well-rounded cornerback room. And I think that's what it's going to be about the entirety of the defense, is having that. And I think you can make the case that linebacker and secondary is better than it was last year in the playoffs, outside of the Sandbacker position, really, because Derek Barnes versus kind of the Trevor Nowaski thing, though Trevor even played better last week against the run. It allowed Ben Neiman to move like he did. So I think there's a lot of positive currently going on right now within the Lions injury report, but unfortunately for the Niners, really their injury report hinges on the offensive line just completely shuffling around, and a lot of these I don't even think we have to wait for the practice report. I'll just kind of tell it to you. So we know there's no Trent Williams at this time, so stepping in was Jalen Moore at offensive tackle. He's also going to be out for this game. And then you get to Spencer Burford, who's playing left tackle, and even Spencer Burford isn't for sure going to play this week, according to Kyle Shanahan. He's like, hey, there's a chance, but it's going to be tight. Playing on Monday probably helps a lot there. The guy's played 31 snaps this year at left tackle for San Fran, so they're at that third option, and if he can't go, it could be Charlie Heck, who they recently required. It could be Pleasant, so they also recently added on the offensive line, kicking into that position. Left tackle position's kind of up in the air a little bit, and they even said that, hey, Charlie Heck, yeah, he could work at tackle, and we'll see, we'll learn more, but he's also could play a lot of different positions. Left guard, you have Aaron Banks, who Kyle Shanahan referred to it as an MCL injury, and a website that I read said partially torn collateral ligament, so I assume that's the same thing, but anyways, we're not going to be seeing Banks either in this game, so stepping into that position could continue to be potentially the young offensive lineman whose last name I don't even want to give it a shot, to be honest with you. Nick Zakelj, I don't know if I'm saying that properly. Probably not, but I remember him coming out of the draft, a tall, very athletic offensive tackle, now kicking in that guard position, and that's really where I think San Fran has an ability to make it work. Is what they are schematically, the outside runs, the toss zone runs, right, the stretching it wide, the toss looks like it. They kind of know who they are, and are able to lean on really good athletes. And then recently they just picked up, they actually signed him to a 2-year deal, which I thought was interesting. Matt Hennessy, the former center who Kyle Shanahan said they liked out of the draft, that has kind of lost his role over the last few years, and he ended up on the Atlanta practice squad after being a starter at center, move around a little bit as well for them. Brendel they still have at center. Dominic Pooney is still at right guard, the rookie out of Kansas, and then they do have Colton McKivitz at right tackles. However, as you can see by the early practice report updates, we see that McKivitz is now on here with a knee injury. So I don't know what his status is, but that could force them into putting both Heck at tackle and also Pleasant starting at tackle. So that's always been the issue with them, is actually the right side of the offensive line. I think Pooney upgraded a little bit there, but now the left side of the offensive line is completely just a mess right now, and they're kind of just going to be rotating pieces in. But I think they've done a nice job. Like, they've added legitimate pieces. They've clearly worked through a lot of depth, and schematically, they just find a way to make it work. So again, every team's dealing with injuries, and I think they've done a good job for the most part. Greenlaw, who ended up returning back in week 15, but then Dre Greenlaw for a couple weeks had soreness. I believe it was calf soreness against the Miami Dolphins. He went out pretty early in that game from what I was watching, what I got through so far. He went out kind of early in that game, and it kind of limited them to more of a nickel packages defensively when in terms of like how do we match personnel. They were like, all right, let's go nickel a little bit. But at the linebacker position, D. Winters kind of steps in right away at that linebacker position opposite of Fred Warner, who's still an animal. That guy just like never seems to miss tackles. I mean, he's incredible in space. Al Shanahan saying Greenlaw is going to be done for the last 2 weeks. Their third linebacker in those spots, at least last week, was Flanagan Fowler stepping in a little bit, and he hasn't played a ton of snaps this year. He struggled a little bit getting off of blocks, so they're a little bit limited at that linebacker position now, especially when you take Greenlaw out. That stinks, man. Greenlaw been dealing with that. It's been awful for a majority of the season. It's really the key things for them is linebackers beat up. Is Burford able to go this week? Banks is, as we kind of know now, not going to be playing this weekend. So without Banks, like, do they go to Nick? Do they go elsewhere? Does Matt Hennessy get a look? And then I would say the other big thing for them as well is that, okay, you have Jair Brown, who has had limited participation in practice on Wednesday, but it's really Isaac Warendo, because at running back, they've kind of made it work. Like, they've leaned on Patrick Taylor, and in that place, they've been able to put guys like Kyle Juszczyk at running back at times, a little bit more of your power runner. They've even put Debo back there. We saw Chicago do something similar with DJ Moore. So they've been able to kind of just like move different pieces into that spot and still be electrifying. And Debo's picked up a lot of the slack just in the pass game. He had a touchdown last week, ran over like 3 guys it was insane. So they've put different guys back there to make it work. But if you get Isaac back, it could maybe more solidify, like, okay, leave these guys at receiver. You know, Kyle Juszczyk, we don't have to put him in the backfield as much anymore, but they have options regardless. A ton of flexibility. And in the back end, I feel like they've just gotten a little bit better as the season gone on. Hufunga's back in the mix. Renardo Green, I think, is playing better at the cornerback position right now. You still have Ward out wide. It's actually become kind of a strength for this team is where they're at the cornerback position with Lenore in the slot. Like, they're relatively healthy back there. They're a little bit young at safety, but they're in pretty good shape in the secondary. And I don't think that was, what I thought was a strength early in the season. I still want to say it's one of the best units, but that for them right now, that's currently a pretty big strength of this defense. Have a guy like Nick Bosa. So you tie those two things together. They still have Nick Bosa. They still have Floyd. They still have Yurcha Gross-Matos, who's been very impactful. Floyd and Gross-Matos are very good in covered spots, dropping into coverage. I don't know about as much run defense consistently, but they're pretty good in covered spots. Their interior is a little bit messy against the run. It's always kind of been like that. It's the early injuries where you have like guys like Malik Collins who they added to try to bolster that a little bit. It's not great. That'll be probably the biggest challenge is like, hey, if their secondary is kind of healthy, but can they stop the run? That'll be the biggest challenge, especially with where their linebackers at. I'm sure that's pretty straightforward in how we're going to approach this game. So maybe that forces us to get more backs involved in this game. I still feel like this is definitely a dangerous team. Like, they don't ever feel that they're not dangerous. But I feel really good about where the Lions are trending, at least in terms of the practice report. So I'm going to leave it right there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Lions-Niners, Monday Night Football. I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Look out for a preview/prediction at some point this weekend, and I'm out.